Welcome to the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction Podcast.
My son recently turned 18 and I was thinking how time flies and that he's not my little boy anymore. A milestone where I'm not supposed to be present 24/7 to protect him. My little boy is on his way to become a man of the world, as they say. And this brings me to today's stories, because everyone knows Achilles, the golden warrior, the rage of the Greeks, the heel that doomed him. But nobody talks about Achilles, the toddler, the little boy who was scared of water. Our first tale is from Kenzie Lappin, whose work you will find everywhere from Cosmic Horror Monthly to Apex Magazine. She's obsessed with mythology, the messier, more human parts that get polished out of the legends. And in How Achilles Grew Up, she does something I have never seen before. She shows us the greatest hero of Troy learning to tie his sandals. This isn't the marble statue version. This is a mother trying to keep her child safe in a world that has already prophesied his death. This is about the marks love leaves on us and how sometimes those marks are the only things that keep us human. How Achilles Grew Up by Kenzie Lappin, taken from Achilles in our Myths, Gods and Immortals series. Read by Nathan Chatelier.
How Achilles Grew Up by Kenzie Lappin. Achilles was born. No one thinks of that, of the great hero as a crying child, of a mother sweating and screaming, of chubby cheeks and child innocence. But he was born to his mother, Thetis. Thetis was a sea nymph, powerful and beautiful. She was raped. That is a story everyone's heard before, but it's just been with 100 different women and swans and young girls. Thetis was supposed to have a powerful and important baby. The baby was supposed to be greater than its father. So it followed the father had to be a man who was, to begin with, not that great. The gods chose him for her. Let's go for the charitable way of looking at things. Thetis and the man who would become her husband met. The man, the great mortal warrior, held her. She, the great shape-changer, switched between every form she knew how. Gas, fire, screaming beasts. She tried to escape his grasp, but he held fast. At the last, she exhausted herself and looked into his eyes and fell in love. And they married. Certainly, it must have been love. Achilles was a bright boy, shining in the sun, greater than his father. There were still folds of fat on his wrists, his heels and feet, the curve of his cheeks. When he walked, it was to his mother. She took him one day when his father was off doing his heroic deeds. She took him to the underworld. She carried him to the side of the river. "Mama," he told her, taking his thumb from his mouth. "Mama, I'm scared of the water." "It is all right," said Thetis. "It will only be for a moment." "Mama," he told her, "I'm scared I'll be carried away." "Never," said Thetis. "I will never let harm come to you, so long as I have a choice in the matter." And she dipped him in the waters of the river Styx. Achilles there learned what it was to be borne up by something greater than you, a river's currents, the whims of the gods, the love of a mother. There he was pulled and grabbed by the water. It went into his eyes and burned his nose. Where he swallowed the water, it hurt, icy cold, thick in his chest. Air became desperate. He thought for a moment he was going to die. And then his mother pulled him out and hugged him tight. "I'm sorry," she said, rocking him back and forth, wiping the child tears from his eyes. "I'm sorry, my baby. But now you'll never be hurt. You will never hurt. They will never hurt you." Achilles was learning what kind of man the baby would become. He nodded, brave and heroic. "Thank you, Mother. I'm glad I now know what it's like to be invincible." His mother's face was wet from the spray of the magical water. She looked sad. Almost. Achilles went to the great forge of his honorary uncle, Hephaestus. He liked the forges. They were filled with fire, with ash, with noise. Achilles could go and touch the boiling pools of iron all he liked, could amuse himself by swinging mystical weapons, and watching his uncle play with stars as heat sources. Achilles was a man now, or at least he was if you asked him. He was a teenager. "Wow," Achilles said, playing with a bow and arrow. He could pull it back now to his ear without having to strain the burgeoning great muscles of his biceps. "Imagine the great battles that will be fought with these." Hephaestus chuckled. When he laughed, it was like the booming of anvils. "Imagine how great the worlds would be if we no longer needed to fight battles." Achilles hesitated, confused. "Don't listen to an old man," Hephaestus said. He used his 2 hands to prop his leg up on a stool. "Oh," Achilles said, "you spoke to my mother." "You are still mortal, Achilles." "There are so many great hunts in this world," Achilles beamed. "So many monsters to kill, so many quests to fulfill. How am I supposed to sit at home and watch a life of obscurity go by? It's not like I'll be hurt." Hephaestus breathed a great gusty sigh. "Not in most ways." "Oh," Achilles said, "you're talking about my heel. You know, Mother frets so much about it." He pulled up the skirts of his tunic, revealing pale marks on his left foot. There were 5 white stripes on his otherwise lovely golden brown heel. "I hate it too." "It's not so terrible as you imagine, Achilles." "It's the thing that can kill me," Achilles scowled. "My one weakness. It's hideous." Hephaestus, the old and tired god, said, "The marks on your heel are from your mother. When she dipped you in the pool that would make you invulnerable to all the physical hurts of the world, she left her hand on your heel." "Yes," said Achilles, who, like everyone else, knew the story. "She did not let you go. She held on to you, Achilles. She knew you were a frightened little boy, and she was not willing to leave you to be afraid alone, not even for a moment." "Oh," said Achilles. "How wonderful it is to let love make us ugly," said Hephaestus, "and to let it mark us." So, the man, or the boy, or whatever he was, learned much that day. Every armor must have its soft parts, so it may be worn without killing its wearer. Every wall must have a hole in it, so you can enter. Everything must not be perfect, or it will be destroyed. Or it will not serve its purpose, and will become something other than what it was made to be. Achilles grew still. He grew and grew like a willow. His mother, fearing his destiny, hid him away. There, he lived a simple life for a while. His bones ached and his joints pulled each night as he got taller and stronger. He would be strong and powerful. He was being built for a life which he did not yet have. Cunning Odysseus came to find him one day. Once he had tricked Achilles into revealing himself from hiding, they sat together as friends. "I will not go," said Achilles. "The war will only be won with you," said Odysseus. Achilles hesitated. "I promised my mother." "Lots of men have a mother," Odysseus said, amused. "For now." "I really shouldn't leave the safety here to go and fight," said Achilles, although perhaps his heart wished otherwise. "Don't you love your country? Don't you love your people?" Achilles' eyes flashed with anger. "Of course I do. You don't know how much I love." "A love for a country carves into your soul," Odysseus said, softening. "It hurts, but it's worth it. It's worth pain to have a home." "The war will be painful," Achilles said, "and some of us won't make it home." "Come on, what kind of attitude is that for a soldier?" said Odysseus. Clever Odysseus. And Achilles knew. But he left his life of solitude and peace anyway. Achilles fought. He became the greatest warrior of the War of Troy. Achilles grew tired of fighting, though he was very good at it, perhaps because he was very good at it. He went to the riverside, sneaking away from camp to speak to his mother. Thetis met him there. "How goes the battle?" she asked. "I'm in love," said Achilles. He knew his mother well enough to see her hesitate a little, to freeze minutely. She was afraid, but she didn't show it. "Oh?" "His name is Patroclus," Achilles said, nearly shyly. His mother said, "Achilles, you know that you are only invulnerable in your body." "Yes," Achilles said, "it's very strange to purposely let something happen that makes you weak. I'm not used to it." "It's very dangerous." "Yes. Well, I knew this feeling when you came around," said Thetis. "But I must say, it is not something I had wished for you." "Oh, but it's quite wonderful." "For now." In the bowels of a giant wooden horse, Achilles dozed. He was older now. War makes you older. He was still in love. The mass of soldiers, of young, fighting men, sweated and jostled, pressed together in the horse's hot scaffolding. Some were scared, and some were bored. "Achilles," said one of the young soldiers, "why will Troy take us into their city? Why will this plan of Odysseus work?" "They can't help it," said Achilles. "Every wall has a gate, and every gate will eventually be opened." "But why?" said another. "You can live a life safe, always. You can keep your city safe if you never open the gates. You'll stay protected. But is that a life worth living? A life without fresh fruits, without new faces, without discovery of the world outside? A gate is made to be opened. That is how you find good things. But it's dangerous. Yes, but watch them open it and let us inside." And the Trojans did, and they hopped out from the horse in the night time, and the battle renewed. Achilles grew even more weary of being the greatest Greek hero. And he lay, listening to Patroclus playing the lyre, and dreamed about open fields and rivers and his childhood. "I don't want to fight any more," Achilles said. "You're good at it," Patroclus said. "Yes." "Okay," Patroclus said, because he had one weakness in his invulnerability too. It was Achilles. "Okay, don't fight anymore, but the fighting still has to be done. So, I will fight for you." He took up Achilles' armor and went out into the battle. He fought bravely. He was killed by the enemy of Achilles, Hector. Hector thought he was Achilles. Achilles cried into his mother's arms. "I'm sorry, my baby," Thetis told him. "The pain you feel is dangerous." "No," Achilles said. "It's not the pain. It's what I'm going to do with it." They knelt together on the ground by the river. She wrapped her hand around the 5 pale marks on his heel, matching perfectly. She said tightly, "There are prophecies about you, that you will be a great warrior, that you will be greater than your father. Yes, that if you fight Hector, you will die. Yes." His mother sighed. "Then don't. Then don't, my son, the great hero. You have not yet given anything away which you might not get back. Patroclus had taken your armor. Your uncle has made you more. You have given your heart, but that might yet go back inside. You have walked away from that which might hurt you. You don't have to go back." Achilles was no longer a child. Perhaps he never was one. Perhaps he still was. "No, mother," he said. "I'm going. I have to avenge him, and I have to win this battle. I love him too much for anything else." "Love," she said derisively. "It hurts." Achilles smiled bright. "Yes, it does." Achilles died. You know that story too. The arrow that pierced his vulnerable naked heel. That was inevitable, maybe, from the day he was born, with him screaming and his mother screaming too. They say his ashes were mixed with those of Patroclus and put together in a golden urn that Thetis made. His mother found him in the underworld and came to visit, passing the river Styx. She took up her skirts so they did not brush the water. She looked out across the golden fields of wheat and saw her son there and his love. They walked together in the sun. They were peaceful. When Achilles saw her, he beamed. He said something to Patroclus and broke away from him, going to his mother. Thetis did not try to embrace him. She didn't want to feel how death had made him a shade. "Aren't you going to ask if we won the war?" asked Thetis. "No," Achilles said. Thetis smiled. "You look happy, son." "I am happy." "It was hard to know that you would end up here," said Thetis, studying him closely. "I always wondered if you knew it would end happily, after all the blood. Or if you just recklessly chose to keep your vulnerable parts exposed, without the gift of knowing the future." "That is what love is," said Achilles. They looked together at Patroclus, who was not wearing armor as he walked the fields, running one gentle hand over the wheat stalks. His mother looked at Achilles' heel. Was it worth it? Achilles said, "Yes." Achilles said, "Every person I chose to love, every mark that they gave me, they're worth it. Yes, I wouldn't have it any other way.
How Achilles grew up tells us being invulnerable doesn't mean you can't be hurt. It just means you have to choose what you are willing to lose. But what about the mother left behind? When the hero dies and the songs are sung, others have to live with the aftermath. And how does one live with a personal loss? Our second story tackles exactly that. Odysseus sails to seek the son of Achilles comes from our Greek myths and tales collection. This version draws from multiple classical sources shaped by various editors and translators over the years. This one follows the cunning, desperate Odysseus as he sails to find Achilles' son. Because the war isn't over and they need someone to fill armor that's still warm with grief. It's about inheritance, about carrying names that are too heavy for living shoulders. Odysseus sails to seek the son of Achilles, narrated by B.
Odysseus sails to seek the son of Achilles. When the Greeks found Ajax lying dead, slain by his own hand, they made a great lament, and above all the brother of Ajax and his wife Tecmessa bewailed him, and the shores of the sea rang with their sorrow. But of all no man was more grieved than Odysseus, and he stood up and said, "Would that the sons of the Trojans had never awarded to me the arms of Achilles, for far rather would I have given them to Ajax, than that this loss should have befallen the whole army of the Greeks. Let no man blame me or be angry with me, for I have not sought for wealth to enrich myself, but for honour only, and to win a name that will be remembered among men in times to come." Then they made a great fire of wood and burned the body of Ajax, lamenting him as they had sorrowed for Achilles. Now it seemed that though the Greeks had won the luck of Troy, had defeated the Amazons and the army of Memnon, they were no nearer taking Troy than ever. They had slain Hector, indeed, and many other Trojans, but they had lost the great Achilles, and Ajax, and Patroclus, and Antilochus, with the princes whom Penthesilea and Memnon slew. And the bands of the dead chiefs were weary of fighting, and eager to go home. The chiefs met in council, and Menelaus arose and said that his heart was wasted with sorrow for the death of so many brave men who had sailed to Troy for his sake. "Would that the death had come upon me before I gathered this host," he said. "But come, let the rest of us launch our swift ships and return each to our own country." He spoke thus to try the Greeks, and see of what courage they were, for his desire was still to burn Troy town and to slay Paris with his own hand. Then uprose Diomede and swore that never would the Greeks turn cowards. He bade them sharpen their swords and make ready for battle. The prophet Calchas, too, arose and reminded the Greeks of how he had always foretold that they would take Troy in the 10th year of the siege, and how the 10th year had come, and victory was almost in their hands. Next Odysseus stood up and said that though Achilles was dead, and there was no prince to lead his men, yet a son had been born to Achilles, while he was on the isle of Scyros, and that son he would bring to fill his father's place. Surely he will come, and for a token I will carry to him those unhappy arms of the great Achilles. Unworthy am I to wear them, and they bring back to mind our sorrow for Ajax. But his son will wear them, in front of the spearmen of Greece, and in the thickest ranks of Troy shall the helmet of Achilles shine, as it was wont to do, for always he fought among the foremost. Thus Odysseus spoke, and he and Diomede with 50 oarsmen went on board a swift ship, and sitting all in order on the benches they smote the grey sea into foam. And Odysseus held the helm and steered them towards the isle of Scyros. Now the Trojans had rest from a war for a while, and Priam, with a heavy heart, bade men to take his chief treasure, the great golden vine, with leaves and clusters of gold, and carry it to the mother of Eurypylus, the king of the people who dwell where the wide marshlands of the river Caicus clang, with the cries of the cranes and herons and wild swans. For the mother of Eurypylus had sworn that never would she let her son go to the war unless Priam sent her the vine of gold, a gift of the gods to an ancient king of Troy. With a heavy heart then Priam sent the golden vine, but Eurypylus was glad when he saw it, and bade all of his men arm, and harness the horses to the chariots. And glad were the Trojans when the long line of the new army wound along the road and into the town. Then Paris welcomed Eurypylus, who was his nephew, son of his sister Astyoche, a daughter of Priam. But the grandfather of Eurypylus was the famous Hercules, the strongest man who ever lived on earth. So Paris brought Eurypylus to his house, where Helen sat working at her embroideries with her 4 bower maidens. And Eurypylus marvelled when he saw her, she was so beautiful. But the Cheta, the people of Eurypylus, feasted in the open air among the Trojans, by the light of the great fires burning, and to the music of pipes and flutes. The Greeks saw the fires and heard the merry music, and they watched all night lest the Trojans should attack the ships before dawn. But in the dawn Eurypylus rose and put on his armour, and hung from his neck by the belt of a great shield on which were fashioned, in the gold of many colours and in silver, the 12 adventures of Hercules, his grandfather, the strange deeds that he did, fighting with monsters and giants, and with the hounds of Hades, who guards the dwellings of the dead. Then Eurypylus led on his whole army, and with the brothers of Hector he charged against the Greeks, who were led by Agamemnon. In that battle Eurypylus first smote Nireus, who was the most beautiful of the Greeks now that Achilles had fallen. There lay Nireus, like an apple tree all covered with blossoms red and white, that the wind has overthrown in a rich man's orchard. Then Eurypylus would have stripped off his armour, but Machaon rushed in, Machaon who had been wounded and taken into the tent of Nestor on the day of the valour of Hector, when he brought the fire against the ships. Machaon drove his spear through the left shoulder of Eurypylus, but Eurypylus struck at his shoulder with his sword, and the blood flowed nevertheless. Machaon stooped and grasped at a great stone, and sent it against the helmet of Eurypylus. He was shaken, but he did not fall. He drove his spear through the breastplate and breast of Machaon, who fell and died. With his last breath he said, "Thou too shalt fall." But Eurypylus made answer, "So let it be. Men cannot live forever, and such is the fortune of war." Thus the battle rang and shone and shifted, till few of the Greeks kept steadfast, except those with Menelaus and Agamemnon, for Diomed and Odysseus were far away upon the sea, bringing from Scyros the son of Achilles. But Teucer slew Polydamas, who had warned Hector to come within the walls of Troy, and Menelaus wounded Deiphobus, the bravest of the sons of Priam, who was still in arms, for many had fallen, and Agamemnon slew certain spearmen of the Trojans. Round Eurypylus fought Paris and Aeneas, who wounded Teucer with a great stone, breaking in his helmet, but he drove back in his chariot to the ships. Menelaus and Agamemnon stood alone and fought in the crowd of the Trojans, like 2 wild boars that a circle of hunters surrounds with spears. So fiercely they stood at bay. But Idomeneus and Meriones of Crete and Thrasymedes, Nestor's son, ran to their rescue, and fiercer grew the fighting. Eurypylus desired to slay Agamemnon and Menelaus, and end the war, but as the spears of the Scots encompassed King James at Fodden Field, till he ran forward and fell within a lance's length of the English general, so the men of Crete and Pylos guarded the 2 princes with their spears. There Paris was wounded in the thigh with a spear, and he retreated a little away, and showered his arrows among the Greeks. And Idomeneus lifted and hurled a great stone at Eurypylus, which struck his spear out of his hand, and he went back to find it. And Menelaus and Agamemnon had breathing space in the battle. But soon Eurypylus returned, crying on his men, and they drove back foot by foot the ring of spears around Agamemnon and Aeneas, and Paris slew men of Crete and Mycenae, till the Greeks were pushed to the ditch round the camp. And then great stones and spears and arrows rained down on the Trojans and the people of Eurypylus from the battlements and towers of the Grecian wall. Now night fell, and Eurypylus knew that he could not win the wall in the dark. So he withdrew his men, and they built great fires and camped upon the plain. The case of the Greeks was now like that of the Trojans after the death of Hector. They buried Machaon and the other chiefs who had fallen, and they remained within their ditch and their wall, for they dared not come out into the open plain. They knew not whether Odysseus and Diomed had come safely to Scyros, or whether their ship had been wrecked or driven into unknown seas. So they sent a herald to Eurypylus asking for a truce, that they might gather their dead and burn them, and the Trojans in Crete also buried their dead. Meanwhile the swift ship of Odysseus had swept through the sea to Scyros, and to the palace of the king Lysimedes. There they found Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, in the court before the doors. He was as tall as his father, and very like him in the face and shape, and he was practising the throwing of a spear at a mark. Right glad were Odysseus and Diomed to behold him, and Odysseus told Neoptolemus who they were, and why they came, and implored him to take pity on the Greeks and help them. "My friend is Diomed, prince of Argos," said Odysseus, "and I am Odysseus of Ithaca. Come with us, and we Greeks will give you countless gifts, and I myself will present you with the armour of your father, such as it is not lawful for any other mortal man to wear, seeing that it is golden, and wrought by the hands of a god. Moreover, when we have taken Troy and go home, Menelaus will give you his daughter, the beautiful Hermione, to be your wife, with gold in great plenty." Then Neoptolemus answered, "It is enough that the Greeks need my sword. Tomorrow we shall sail for Troy." He led them into the palace to dine, and there they found his mother, the beautiful Diomedea, in mourning raiment, and she wept when she heard that they had come to take her son away. But Neoptolemus comforted her, promising to return safely with the spoils of Troy. "Or even if I fall," he said, "it will be doing deeds worthy of my father's name." So, next day, they sailed, leaving Diomedea mournful, like a swallow whose nest a serpent has found, and has killed her young ones. Even so she wailed, and went up and down in the house. But the ship ran swiftly on her way, cleaving the dark waves, till Odysseus showed Neoptolemus the far-off snowy crest of Mount Ida, and Tenedos, the island near Troy. And they passed the plain where the tomb of Achilles stands. But Odysseus did not tell the son that it was his father's tomb. Now all this time the Greeks, shut up within their wall and fighting from their towers, were looking back across the sea, eager to spy the ship of Odysseus, like men wrecked on a desert island who keep watch every day for a sail afar off, hoping that the seamen will touch at their isle and have pity upon them and carry them home. So the Greeks kept watch for the ship bearing Neoptolemus. Diomed, too, had been watching the shore, and when they came in sight of the ships of the Greeks, he saw that they were being besieged by the Trojans, and that all the Greek army was penned up within the walls and was fighting from the towers. Then he cried aloud to Odysseus and Neoptolemus, "Make haste, friends, let us arm before we land, for some great evil has fallen upon the Greeks. The Trojans are attacking our wall, and soon will burn our ships, and for us there will be no return." Then all the men on the ship of Odysseus armed themselves, and Neoptolemus in the splendid armour of his father was the first to leap ashore. The Greeks could not come up from the wall to welcome him, for they were fighting hard, hand to hand with Eurypylus and his men. But they glanced back over their shoulders, and it seemed to them that they saw Achilles himself. They raised a great battle cry, and when Neoptolemus reached the battlements, he and Odysseus and Diomed leaped down to the plain. The Greeks following them, and they all charged at once on the men of Eurypylus with levelled spears and drove them from the wall. Then the Trojans trembled, for they knew the shields of Diomed and Odysseus, and they thought that the tall chief in the armour of Achilles was Achilles himself, come back from the land of the dead to take vengeance for Antilochus. The Trojans fled and gathered around Eurypylus, as in a thunderstorm little children, afraid of the lightning and the noise, run and cluster round their father to hide their faces on his knees. But Neoptolemus was spearing the Trojans, as a man who carries a night beacon of fire, in his boat on the sea spears the fishes that flock around, drawn by the blaze of the flame. Cruelly he avenged his father's death on many a Trojan, and the men whom Achilles had led followed Achilles' son, slaying to the right and left and smiting the Trojans as they ran, between the shoulders with the spear. Thus they fought and followed while daylight lasted, but when the night fell, they led Neoptolemus to his father's hut, where the woman washed him in the bath, and then he was taken to feast with Agamemnon, Menelaus, and the princess. They all welcomed him and gave him glorious gifts, swords with silver hilts, and cups of gold and silver. And they were glad, for they had driven the Trojans from their wall, and hoped that tomorrow they would slay Eurypylus and take Troy town. But their hope was not to be fulfilled, for the next day Eurypylus met Neoptolemus in the battle, and was slain by him. When the Greeks chased the Trojans into their city, so great a storm of lightning and thunder and rain fell upon them, that they retreated again to their camp. They believed that Zeus, the chief of the gods, was angry with them, and the days went by, and Troy still stood unconquered.
Two stories about the same impossible weight. One about a boy learning his mortal, the other about a young man learning he's expected to be anything but. You know what gets me? Both these stories end the same way, with someone putting an armor they know doesn't fit. Not because they want to be heroes, but because everyone they care about is counting on them to try. Those white marks on Achilles' heel, his mother's fingertips burned into his skin forever, she could have let go, could have made him perfectly safe. But she didn't. She held on because that's what mothers do. I used to think heroism was about being untouchable. Now I think it's the opposite. It's about staying close enough to get hurt. Anyway, that's all from me today. But seriously, next time you are wandering past some museum statue of a Greek hero looking all noble and marble perfect, just remember, that guy probably wet the bed until he was 7.
Thanks so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast and look forward to the next episode. Do recommend it to your friends. Goodbye for now.